Welcome to The Explainer. We're all about breaking down big ideas, and today we are diving into a really strange, ancient legal puzzle. Seriously, it's got some very unexpected characters.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. A louse, a gust of wind, and a bandage. I know, it sounds like the setup to a really weird joke, right? But it's actually the key to a question that takes us way, way back, deep into a world of incredible logical and, well, spiritual precision. These three things, they're all pieces of this fascinating debate about what it really means to be connected to something sacred.
So to get to the bottom of this, our story has to start in the heart of ancient Jerusalem, at the sacred temple. Now, you have to imagine, this was a place where literally every single detail mattered. Every action, every object, every part of the service, it all had this profound significance. And the whole thing, the entire system, it all revolved around one core idea: perfect, unbroken connection.
And here is the absolute crux of it. The Torah says the special garments the priest wore had to be, and I quote, upon his body. That was taken to mean a direct, unbroken, skin-to-garment contact. Think about that. Nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, was supposed to get in between the priest's body and his sacred clothes.
Okay, so this idea of a forbidden barrier, it actually has a name. In Hebrew, it's called hatzitza. It basically means interposition. And a hatzitza could be almost anything: a stray thread, a speck of dust, you name it. And if it was there, it could potentially invalidate the entire sacred service. So yeah, this one word, hatzitza, it's the key that's going to unlock this whole puzzle for us.
So you've got this absolute perfect rule. But what happens when that rule slams right into the messy reality of everyday life? Well, that's where things start to get really interesting.
The ancient sages actually wrestled with a super practical problem. Let's say a priest is on duty, and boom, he cuts his finger. What does he do? I mean, he's got to stop the bleeding, right? The law said, okay, you can use a simple reed to wrap it up for a minute. But what about a real bandage? You know, a small piece of cloth. This isn't just some abstract thought experiment. It's a real-world problem, and they needed a very precise answer.
And this is where you see the first layer of the debate, and it is brilliant. You've got two rabbis, and they come at it from completely different angles. Rabbi Yudah says, look, any piece of cloth, even a tiny bandage, is an extra garment, and adding garments to the official set, absolutely forbidden. But then Rabbi Yochanan comes back and says, hold on. It only counts as an extra garment if you wear it where the vestments are supposed to go, like on your chest. A bandage on a finger, that's a totally different ballgame, in his view.
But then the whole argument pivots. Okay, they say fine, maybe it's not an extra garment, but isn't the bandage still an interposition, a katsitsa? And a counter-argument is so clever. It only matters if it actually interferes with the service. So a bandage on the left hand, probably not a problem, since all the really important sacred stuff was done with the right hand. So the takeaway here is that context is everything. It's all about where the object is and what it's doing.
Okay, so now that we've got the basic principle of chatzitza down, get ready because this is where things get, well, kind of weird. The sages take this idea and they just push it to its absolute logical limits with a series of truly mind-bending questions.
So the sage Ravka kicks things off with something you can't even touch: air. He asks, what if a gust of wind blows under the priest's robe, lifting it off his skin for just a second? Does that pocket of air count as an interposition? Does it break the upon his body rule? Or is that just, how clothes work?
And then the question gets even stranger. What about a louse? Yeah, a tiny living bug on the priest's skin. The sages actually drew a line here. A dead louse? That's a chatzitza for sure. It's just like a speck of dust, but a live one. Does the fact that it's alive and moves around on its own change things? Is it less of a barrier and more like just a part of the landscape of the skin for a moment?
And they didn't stop there. They even started questioning the nature of clothing itself. You know how a shirt or a robe naturally has gaps and folds? Well, what about the space under a priest's armpit, where the robe obviously isn't touching the skin? Does that count as a forbidden separation?
The questions just keep getting more and more personal, drilling right down to the priest's own body. What if some of his own hair, his long hair, falls down his back and gets trapped between his skin and his robe? Is your own hair considered part of you in that moment, or does it become an external object creating an interposition?
I mean, what's so incredible here is just the sheer scope of this thought experiment. They're going from something intangible like the wind to a living bug
to a loose thread from the garment itself, all the way to a piece of the priest's own body. It just shows you no detail was too small, no possibility was left off the table in this intense, rigorous pursuit of perfect understanding.
Okay, so all of this brings us to what I think is the ultimate stress test for this whole rule of Chatzitza. What happens when two different sacred commandments seem to crash right into each other?
And here's the final puzzle, and it is a fascinating one. It's about phylacteries, or tefillin. Now, these are the small leather boxes with scripture inside that are strapped to the arm and head. That's a whole separate religious commandment. So here's the question. Does following one divine command, wearing your tefillin, create a forbidden barrier that messes up another divine command, the temple service? It's like a clash of the titans, but for sacred rules.
At first glance, the answer seems pretty cut and dry. A sage named Rabbi Ami comes forward with a tradition that seems to settle it. Yep, phylacteries are a chatzitza. They're a barrier. You can't wear them during the service. End of story, right?
Well, not so fast, because another ancient source gets brought into the mix, and it says the exact opposite. It suggests that if a priest did wear phylacteries, specifically the ones on the head, they would not interpose. So now you've got a major logical crisis. How can both of these things be true? This is a problem that requires a seriously clever and elegant solution.
And the solution they came up with is just genius. It's all in the very specific prescribed way the high priest wore his headgear. Okay, follow me on this. First, you've got the golden front plate, worn low on the forehead. Then, higher up on the head, you have the mitre, which is a type of turban. Now, this was done on purpose, to leave a small gap of visible hair right between those two sacred items. And it was exactly in that little gap, that designated neutral zone, that the head phylacteries could be placed. They would only be touching hair, not the vestments, and so, poof, no interposition.
Okay, so after all of that, lice, wind, bandages, headgear, what's the big picture here? What's the real takeaway from this incredibly detailed ancient puzzle? What does it all really mean?
Well, what it reveals is a worldview where the physical and the spiritual are just completely intertwined. There's no separation. Every tiny detail of the physical world is charged with significance. And this incredible focus on precision, it's not just about being a stickler for the rules, it's a form of reverence. The very act of trying to understand the rule, of wrestling with it, that is its own sacred act.
And that's really the heart of it. It shows that the process is the purpose. The relentless questioning, the fact that they were willing to entertain these wild hypotheticals about lice and wind, the logical deep dive into every single possibility, that is what truly matters. It's a celebration of the human mind engaging with and trying to understand divine concepts.
And so that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. In our world today, which is all about speed and convenience and shortcuts, what can we learn from a mindset that values this level of meticulous, painstaking attention to detail? What does it tell us about how we define and how we approach the things that we ourselves consider sacred?